Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, that was a wonderful speech by that Speaker, Mr. Davis, who prior to that speech, I think, had a future in the Labor Party, and I think Mr. Goff saw a future in him. And only go to show to me the one underlying factor I've picked up in the Labor Party in recent days: they can't add. And I know Mr. Davis was a good teacher in the far north, but what it's shown to me is that they can't add. Because what we've seen in the last 2 days is a whole lot of choices presented to New Zealand, a future of choices, a choice where we have a balanced, prudent fiscal position, a sustainable position for my children and my grandchildren in the future to live in this country, or one where a bank from somewhere overseas comes and takes us over because we don't have the ability to pay our bills, Mr. Speaker. We have a situation where, under Labor, we'll have another generation of extreme borrowing and a crisis will occur. Under Labor, we'll have a situation where we'll be borrowing whatever the number is that Mr. Davis might think is the right number, another $5 billion a year. $5 billion a year, Mr. Speaker. And what does that might mean? Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the Labor Party, they say, don't you worry, we have a plan. Well, I like to hear it, because not everybody in the public like to hear it, Mr. Speaker, and we haven't heard it. We heard Mr. Hughes earlier tonight, sort of about his plan. He said, cut government pensions of Mr. Hayes. Well, he said that would save $1 million. It just shows to show you they can't add. Last time I saw it, Mr. Hayes didn't get $1 million a year. We've heard Labor MPs. I can talk to the one I ran against, Ms Dalziel, who said, look, I would go and get another job if I could, but I can't get one paying what I get paid. And that shows you the future that the Labor Party sees in New Zealand. We've seen today, question time, we had a question today talking about the decade of deficits that was coming forward in the 2008 election. What did Labor do? They went quiet, because they knew it was true. They knew that New Zealand was facing a bankrupt position, and that's why they voted in a John Key-led government. We know under Labor, another $5 billion, you know what that would mean to mums and dads back home? It would mean a situation where interest rates would go up, just like it did in Greece, just like it's done in Ireland, just like it's done in Portugal, about 4 to 5% per annum. 4 to 5%. That to the average house mortgage in New Zealand, about $150,000, that's an extra $50 to $150 a week, depending on where you live and how much you borrow. $50 to $150 a week. Now that's what Phil Goff's going to give New Zealand. Not $10 a week from his $5,000 tax-free, but an increase in their mortgage that they can't afford. It's not a sustainable position, and not a position that I want, or nor that the majority of New Zealanders want, as we're seeing by the polls. We've heard today also the rhetoric about early childhood education. I mean, I know a little bit about early childhood education. I've got 2 young kids. I've been through the sector. My mother was a founder of a play centre. I went through a play centre. I've been involved in the movement. My children have gone through from everything from community-led centres, parent-led centres, through to fully trained private centres. And you know what? They're all got positive aspects of them. In the last 6 months, I've visited 16 centres across various parts of Christchurch. And you know what you hear when you go talk to these people? You go talk to the people like choices. They like the ability to say, hey, if I'm a parent, I don't care whether I've got a degree, but I want the ability to raise my children in some way. And that's why we put in place 20 hours ECE for play centres and kangaroos. Because under Labor, they were discriminated against because they weren't union members. If you were running a play centre or a kangaroo, you didn't get the right amount of money because you weren't part of the early childhood union. And I thought that was outrageous, Mr. Speaker. And that's one of the reasons we were part of a government that brought in equalisation, that treated centres across the country the same. Because that's what we believe in. We believe in all people are equal. We have a situation where, under Labor, we've got a situation where 40% of kids in the country, 40% of the kids cannot get access to early childhood education. Right now, 40%. We had a meeting last 2 or 3 weeks ago that the Labor Party summoned me along to. I turned up in Christchurch. I had a whole bunch of union people scream and yell at me and say, we need 100% qualified teachers, because that's the right way to do things. And I said, well, that's okay, that's fine, but who's going to pay for that? And they said, oh, well, somebody else can pay. And this is the problem with the Labor Party. It's always somebody else can pay. Well, the problem we have with the union mentality, there isn't enough people to pay for all the things that they want to pay for. And I want to show you a couple of things. The wonderful Ministry of Education have this great thing called early learning for early childhood centres, talking about young children are readers, writers and mathematicians. Given the numbers that we've seen from the Labor Party in recent times, I think they could do with a bit of mathematician training. See, reading, and this is about parents, family and whānau are an important part of child's learning. It doesn't say anything about trade union members, anyone here. And I challenge the Labor Party to have a look at this. This is the early childhood curriculum here for parents at home to have a look through and see what it means for early childhood centres. Mr Speaker, we've seen the record ever spend for early childhood spending this year, more than any other government has ever done. And what that's going to mean is 3,500 kids around New Zealand are going to get access to early childhood centres who didn't get it previously. And I challenge the Labor Party to come to parts of anywhere in New Zealand where they're going to get money for a new centre and instead say, you can't have it, you can't have any money because a guy down the road wants a better quality education and they don't want to pay for it. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair. 3,500 extra kids are going to get early childhood education in New Zealand because of this government, Mr Speaker, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Mr Speaker, one of the other wonderful things we've seen and talked about is the area of science and innovation. That's something I'm a big fan of, and we've got Dr Mapp in the House, and he's a wonderful opponent of the great work that's been done in that area. We inherited a ridiculous policy that was around what's called a tax credit, and I want to tell you some of the stupidity that occurred under that policy. Every accounting firm in New Zealand thought it was Christmas. Every accounting firm. You had every senior tax accountant in New Zealand suddenly ratcheted up their rates, were suddenly making $300,000 to $400,000 extra billing, because I'd go to anyone that had any form of research and say, don't you worry about it, I'll fill in the forms, I'll get you some money and I'll take a cut. And that's what you saw. You saw not one extra dollar of research and innovation, but you saw every accounting firm in the country make money. I know because lots of my friends did it and they're very open about it. But under Dr Matt and under our John Key-led government, what we've seen is a move to innovation. We've seen some wonderful movement in terms of grants to incredibly innovative companies, a couple of which I have very fond knowledge of myself, one of which is around rockets and around about jetpacks. Wonderful companies that have the great future of New Zealand. Sorry, what's that, Dr Matt? Oh, and yoke bikes. Yoke bikes is an innovative bike in Canterbury. Mr Speaker, these are the sort of businesses that are actually going to grow New Zealand and create our wealth, and perhaps in a situation where that'll give us innovative jobs. And the ability for us is to create those real sustainable jobs. People will pay taxes and get New Zealand back on a sustainable position. Mr Speaker, I want to talk quickly about a series of disasters that we inherited, particularly the earthquake in Canterbury. In Christchurch, where I live, there's been a series of problems. As you may know, there's been a series of significant problems that have occurred. For my own family, my brother's home has been destroyed, my mum and dad's home has been destroyed, my own home has been damaged, Mrs Adams' house has been damaged, and we're in a situation where one of the major aspects for us is the rebuilding the infrastructure in Christchurch. And I look forward on Friday, there's going to be a big presentation and a blessing of the first start of the infrastructure build in Christchurch. I want to tell you as part of that a little thing about some of the reasons why that the people of New Zealand are going to re-elect a John Key government in November 26. So when I first got elected, I got knocked on the door by a lady called Joan. Joan lived in a state house not far away from my electorate office. Out of Parliament office, sorry, I'm not allowed to call it an electorate office. And what happened, Joan had a fence that she'd been trying to get fixed for 8 years. She was a former Labor Party member and she couldn't get the fence fixed. She had a dog and a 2-year-old grandchild who kept running through the fence. She couldn't get it fixed. I rang up Housing New Zealand. Housing New Zealand said, oh, look, problem, massive bureaucracy. It's going to take all these forms to fill. So, you know what we did? We got the local people down and we said, you come down and fix it or we'll fix it ourselves. So we had a situation for 9 years. She had been dealing with a local Labor MP trying to get things fixed. The craziness was we got it fixed and in 5 minutes she went from being a Labor voter to a National voter because we actually changed a little bit of her life in some way. We had another situation. Carol had a heater that had been bung and she couldn't work out. How did she get her house warmer and better? We had a situation where her house got insulated. She ended up putting an energy-efficient device at her home, as a result of which she thinks the national government is the greatest thing in the world. But for 9 years, she tried to get help from a Labor government who wouldn't give her help, who told her time and time again, look, you're not important enough. You're not of the right group for us to help in many ways. Mr Speaker, these are the reasons why on November 26 a national-led government is going to be elected, around skills and innovation, about investment and infrastructure, about smarter public services, about investment in fairer and a better tax system, and about more smarter regulation. And Mr Speaker, that's why, Mr Speaker, in November 26, you're going to see a John Key-led government and you're going to see a return back to prosperity for New Zealand. Thank you.
I call Carol Bowman.